uses, perhaps. One is, for context, I want to separate these three words I'm going to be throwing out a lot. I want to sort of emphasize the three different things. When I say glitch art, that's going to mean one thing. When I say a glitch, that's going to refer to this thing that happens when things break. And if I just say glitch without the letter A before it, then I'm referring to this festival, just because it's easier than spelling out the name, which is GLI.TC/H. It's just easier to say glitch, so I'm just going to say glitch. I'm also going to be saying, I might be saying we a lot in reference to glitch. And we, I guess, means a whole ton of people, the organizers, so like John Satcham, who's hanging out back there, and myself, and Rosa Makeman, who sort of put this event on last year in Chicago, and is now this year expanded over to Amsterdam and Birmingham. There's a whole bunch of people involved, including Evan Meany, Theo Darst, Massendorf, Antonio, who's done all this crazy stuff today, and then all of the artists and stuff, and all of you. So when I say we've been talking about, that's kind of, I mean, all these people in this context of glitch, right? So glitch, glitch art. So when I say glitch art can refer to a lot of things, and this is something that I mentioned. Some of this is repeated from the workshop, so some of you said in the workshops, some repetition here, but I've been making glitch art for a few years, and defining it has been a really tricky thing. And I'm constantly redefining it for myself. I think the main thing to keep in mind is that it means different things in different contexts. So sometimes it refers to a genre, glitch art is a genre. Sometimes it refers to a perspective or a take or approach on making work. Sometimes it refers to a product or an output, a work of glitch art. Within the context of glitch, GLI.TC/H, we've been using that word to refer to a community. So all the artists and enthusiasts sort of congregate on the internet to share work, discuss work, and occasionally IRL, in real life, like in this situation. So glitch art as a community. And then there's glitch art as a process, which is the context I'm going to be referring to it within this talk. So when I say glitch art, I'm going to be more specifically referring to the process of glitch art. Like Antonio said, I'm going to be talking about the politics in and of glitch. So I should get my presentation over on that screen. Biggest text edit file ever. Maybe like, okay. So the politics in and of glitch. And so I'm going to be sort of proposing some political framework or motive or impetus for producing glitch art, or for taking part in glitch art as a process. But by no means do I mean to imply that this is the only or more valid reason for taking part in that process. One thing that I think glitch as an event makes really clear is that there's just a whole array of reasons of why people come to making this kind of work and partake in this kind of work. And there's a whole bunch of different kinds of, or different artists and works that have very different concerns, whether that be digital psychedelia, which is a huge chunk of glitch art work, whether it be nostalgia, which is a common theme in a lot of glitch art work, whether it be entropy and decay, whether it be chaos and randomness. All of these are sort of valid, I think, valid and exciting in their own way, themes and reasons for coming to glitch art. So politics is just one of those themes, and it often mishmashes, right, with a lot of the other ones. So it's another disclaimer. Also, I'm going to be doing this a lot because this is a relatively, or it is sort of a new lecture, and so I'm going to be doing a lot of reading, which I apologize. I try to avoid doing reading. I prefer to look out and see the critique in everyone's eyes as I make claims for things, and I'm going to be making a lot of claims and assumptions, which will warrant a lot of critique, which will immediately follow after the talk. So I'm going to miss those initially because I'll be looking down a lot. Cool, and the other thing is to give context to this talk, politics in Glitch. So the reason for this talk, I think, or a big part of the impetus was this was a topic that was sort of glazed over last year at Glitch in Chicago. It was sort of touched on briefly in different talks and with different works, and people asked about it. Conversations maybe more took place in bars after the events, but no real official internal context of the actual scheduled event, right? So it's something that we, as organizers and stuff, decided we wanted to sort of really hit on this year. So we held a panel in Chicago 3 weeks back when we got things kicked off over there. And that had 3 speakers. It was supposed to be 4, but Benjamin Galan kind of got held up on the interwebs. But the idea was that these were 4 different perspectives on glitch politics. Benjamin Galan sort of coming from, aka recyclism, which some of you may know, coming from this sort of planned obsolescence critique. And then Marta Blichares, she gave a talk about sort of representation of people, social norms, kind of a feminist sort of approach to glitch in the way that glitch can sort of rail up against these social norms and sort of mainstream representation. And then Paul Hertz gave another very poetic and theoretical talk about chaos theory, Virilio, and these sort of opened up a lot of other spaces for glitch as a political endeavor. And then I gave my spiel. So what I'm presenting is just my spiel. So even politics being only one sort of valid theme within an array of themes that glitch art approaches, this is also just my own take on politics. Okay, so it's a lot of disclaimers. I'm going to get into the talk. So I might also make this plain text. Oh, my formatting. It's a little messy. I'm going to be copying and pasting bits into this text edit. So the talk is called "The Medium is the Error Message." So it's a known trope at this point, perhaps even a cliche, and yet I think still not a normative way of understanding technology and or our relationship with this medium. I'm talking about the reference I'm making here, which is the medium is the message, this sort of Marshall McLuhan aphorism. So, and for those maybe less familiar, this is maybe Marshall McLuhan's most famous sentence, the medium is the message, trope. And his favorite example was the light bulb example. I prefer the fireplace example, which is this idea that, so with, when the family congregated around the fireplace to stay warm, it meant that there was a sort of central space where everybody had to sort of navigate to, right, to stay warm. And so this meant there was sharing that happening from the fireplace, and relationships were made stronger by the fireplace. And then when central heating comes along, you've got warmth in all the individual rooms, and so the family speculatively may no longer congregate, and they would have less chats about stuff, and so the relationships might actually tear apart rather than get stronger. So the idea here is that the medium, rather than the message, has a larger impact on these relationships. So the medium being fireplace versus central heating, the message just being heat. Heat isn't really affecting, the heat stays the same, heat from the fireplace, heat from central heating, but the sort of switching of the medium more drastically impacts the relationship between this family, right? So that's the medium is the message drastically oversimplified. So even though that this is a kind of I think to some sort of academics, a kind of almost cliche claim, the medium is the message, it's still not a normative way of approaching or thinking about technology, I don't think. It's been adopted rhetorically maybe, but not practically. So I think, again, that this may have something to do with the interface and something to do with its efforts to be user-friendly and its process invisible. In fact, it's a tenet of the tech industry that when the medium and its workings is unrecognizable and or goes unnoticed, it's working best. Like the iPad. When the iPad first came out, I don't know if you had a similar campaign in the UK that we did in the States, but it was all about how magical it was. When people talked about the iPad, the posters were all like, it's magical, right? So it's not technology, it's just magical. Don't ask questions about how it works. So the interface is an abstraction layer of a process that's radically alien to most human experience. An abstraction presented as control. Florian Kramer and Matthew Fuller argue that an interface, even a programming interface, quote, like any language or instrument, impose and enhance particular workflows, thought modes, and modes of interaction upon or in combination with human users. So, to recap some of this based more on my notes. Wow, it's too massive. Okay, so yeah, medium message. Might equal cliche, but it's still not a normative view. I think this has something to do with the interface and the industry's magical interests. You could say maybe even magical special interests. Okay, so glitch art, as a process, again, is often about misusing the interface and or hacking the interface at a level deeper than normal for any particular user or misuser. Like this. So, as a process, this forces a kind of awareness about our relationship to these technologies, which is normally out of mind. I think I'm talking about a kind of Heideggerian mindset, as in Heidegger. Heidegger says that technology, rather than a means, is a symptom of our specific view, what he calls enframing, of the world. So one example, if I understand correctly, might be the difference between wind turbines and hydraulic fracking. I don't know if hydraulic fracking is very common in the UK. Maybe I think this might be the US leading the way with innovative energy. The way that this works is that you send just very dangerous chemicals down into the ground to sort of like explode, just make a mess of things underneath the Earth's surface, and you get natural gases this way that you can then use for energy. It's very dangerous. It sends people's sinks and water sort of pipes up in flames. And the idea is that this demonstrates a particular perspective or view on our relationship to the world. We view that the Earth is just a kind of well of resources that we can go and explode and pull out, right? Whereas wind turbines presents a very different perspective or view on the world, where wind turbines, right, work with the wind. As the wind blows, wind turbines turn, creates energy. So it doesn't sort of view it as this well of resources, but rather something that sort of exists, this kind of more of a symbiotic relationship, right? So technology, rather than a tool or a means, is a kind of symptom of our view or perspective on the world. So Heidegger says the problem is that we refuse to be mindful or aware of this and just assume technology can always make everything easier, better, more efficient. And this assumption is one that a good interface attempts to propagate. Glitch art, again as a process, forces the misuser into a kind of Heideggerian mindfulness. Even at the most introductory level of glitch art, a data bend, you immediately become aware of some of the roles technology plays in your relationship to the world, or at the very least aware that it may be playing a role. I think glitch art as a product or a genre can also sometimes achieve this. I think Jody's work, the duo Jody, does this really great, really successfully. However, as a process, it's rare that glitch art doesn't achieve this. I should backtrack. So when I say data bending, maybe show of hands, how many people data bend here? Okay, all right, well, detour or sidetrack. Maybe we should real quick do a data bend, because this is very important. So data bending is sort of like glitch art 101. It's usually the first kind of glitch that a glitch artist does as he or she embarks on their glitch journey. And it's really great for a few reasons. So the way it works is you sort of just grab any image file. Maybe we can pull this out. That's too big. Alright, so I'm just on Google looking for a picture. Okay, there's a picture. Drag this picture onto my desktop. So this is a JPEG. I know that this is a JPEG. Again, another apologies to those that just did the workshop with me, because it's the same thing I just did in the workshop. I'm going to do this again. So a JPEG is an image file. An image is a sort of a matrix of pixels. This means, right, a grid of different pixels, of different bits of color that when you sort of zoom out and look at it, you have an image. Below this matrix of pixels, you have code that represents the information for each one of these pixels. And at the lowest level of code, you have what's known as binary code. Some of you may, even if you don't necessarily know exactly what binary code is, have probably heard that term. It's essentially sort of the atoms of the digital world. So while everything in the sort of physical world can be broken down to atoms, the sort of smallest unit of measurement in the physical world, binary code is the equivalent in the virtual world. It's the smallest unit of measurement. Every digital file, software, images, movies, etc. can be broken down into binary code. So a JPEG, while it's a matrix of pixels, while it's an image, it can also be understood as a container for ones and zeros. If you double click this JPEG, and you get this. This is preview. It's my default image viewer. We could also, and so displaying that matrix of pixels, we could also say that this is preview, this particular application's interpretation of that binary data. And the computer sort of made an assumption that this particular file, I wanted to view it in preview. That's normally a safe assumption. If you downloaded this picture of a cat to show your friend or something, and you probably want to open it up in preview. However, if you're a glitch artist, that's the wrong assumption. You probably initially want to open it up with a different program, specifically a text editor or a hex editor. And the way you would do this is by right mouse clicking the image. And this also works the same on PC and on Windows and on Linux. And if you go to open with, you get another series of assumptions where the computer says, oh, maybe you don't want to open it with preview, perhaps you'd like to use some of the other image rendering softwares. Again, I say no, that's the wrong assumption. I click other, and then I'm given an option. I'm sort of presented with all my applications. And if I scroll down to text edit, then I get something that looks like this. So
interpretation of that binary data. Because again, we said that JPEG is really just a container for ones and zeros. This is preview's interpretation of those same ones and zeros. This is TextEdit's interpretation of the same ones and zeros. So this is the same file, just two different interpretations of that file. The cool thing about this one is that I can edit it. So if I go in and just start typing random nonsense, and I save that, and I come back here and click on my cat, sort of it immediately glitches. Pretty awesome. First time I did this, I was, well, it changed my life. Because I did not stop doing this for years. Because it's sort of, again, this is what I mean about this drastic reorientation to technology. This kind of agency that I had no idea was there, that I could access. Again, because there's these layers of assumptions that the interface is making before I can even get to this point. And I'm never really told that I can do this. There's a whole bunch of really awesome stuff you can do here. You can copy and paste big chunks, and just paste them randomly in other parts of the file. And it gets even crazier. You can do like find and replace commands. So take all of my A's and replace them with Z's. And I can save that. And it gets even crazier. So this is also known as data bending. This is a sort of, like I said, maybe glitch 101, like sort of, at least on the software digital end. Maybe the equivalent, it's called data bending because it sort of takes that name from circuit bending, which was that first workshop that we had in this space earlier today, which is the first step in hardware hacking is circuit bending. So this is the sort of software equivalent. Okay, cool. So now back to the lecture. Okay. So take the simplest intentional glitch gesture, a data bend, or data bending image. Wait, did I skip some part of my thing here? Yeah, okay, so take the simplest intentional glitch gesture, data bending an image. Anyone on the glitch flicker pool? Anybody on the glitch flicker pool? Should all, once you start data bending, start sharing your stuff on the glitch flicker pool. It's a glitch art group that's been around for a few years. Lots of good conversation happens there, as well as glitch art sharing. And anybody on that group could tell you that the content, this is sort of now referencing McLuhan again, the content of an image has less effect on the way your image will glitch than the particular file format, the medium. A portrait of a landscape and a cat will always glitch the same way, but a JPEG, a GIF, and a PNG, all these different file formats, won't. They'll glitch differently. They break differently. So even in the simplest glitch gesture, a data bend, we're forced to address an image as a medium, a file, a container for ones and zeros, and not merely as a portrait, a landscape, or a cat. Regardless of whether you prefer data bending on TextEdit or a hex editor, you'll always have to right-click that file and choose Open With before you double-click that file. Oh, rather, sorry. Because if you double-click that file, your operating system makes an assumption about what or how you want to see. Additionally, if you bend the image too much, so that's sort of editing, if you get a bit too crazy, your glitch file is replaced with an error message. This is another assumption. It'll say something like, we're sorry, this file is corrupt and cannot be viewed. It can be viewed, it just notice that there's a few bugs in there, and you probably don't want to see that, which again, as a glitch artist, is a horrible assumption. Additionally, right, so glitches, glitch art as a product or a genre in this case, that once existed may not in the future, if the interface decides or assumes that you don't want to see it. And this sort of temporal sort of thing is really important, where this can change because technology is constantly upgrading, the interface is constantly changing, and that affects this kind of work pretty directly. The best example is probably this piece by Corey Archangel
called Data Diaries. Corey Archangel's is sort of, Andy Warhol of the new media art. And he has this really old piece called Data Diaries, where he sort of takes all this RAM dump from his computer and sort of visualizes it by running it through QuickTime. So QuickTime is reading all these, oversimplifying a bit, but QuickTime's running all these files that's normally not meant to be seen on QuickTime, so it looks like all glitchy and garbled. The videos themselves are actually really, really tiny. They're like maybe 10 pixels by 10 pixels, so when you put them on the internet, in the HTML code, he has them sort of modified to stretch a bit bigger so you can see the detail a lot clearer. And so initially there were these really sharp, glitchy images, and then there were a few browser updates later, and the browser assumed that since this image was being sort of stretched and sort of pulled out bigger, that you want a nice sort of layer of blur over it. I don't know if you've noticed this if you're using Photoshop, sometimes you sort of blow up an image that was really small, so rather than seeing it all pixelated, the software just sort of blurs it out and smoothing it out. So Corey Archangel's sort of seminal piece of new media art went from being this really blocky, edgy thing to a blur of colors. So that's a pretty drastic remix on the part of Firefox and Internet Explorer that Corey Archangel may not have really intended. So again, an assumption. So now to connect these ideas a bit with some of my own work, specifically this project, the Glitch Codec tutorial, which I just gave an hour ago to some of you in that room. So shortly after starting my graduate degree, I set off on a project that would eventually become this Glitch Codec tutorial, with a lot of help from really great advisors, specifically Ben Chan and John Cates, as well as a bunch of sort of peers, and especially with a lot of help from glitch artists on the internet. I realized that I could data bend at a kind of deeper level, rather than corrupting the output files that already exist, like I did now with the cat. I could actually hack the codecs that encode these files beforehand, and then any file that I run through these compression algorithms would end up becoming glitched. So it was a sort of different level of access to file corruption. So initially I figured this would be a means for creating work, glitch art as a genre or a product. However, I became less interested in the output and much more interested in the process. While hacking codecs, just as with data bending, I was forced into this kind of deep Heideggerian mindset and very aware of the medium and technology's assumptions. I began understanding codecs themselves as assumptions. So a codec, for those that maybe are less familiar with this term, codec stands for coder, decoder, and it's a series of compression algorithms used to achieve a compromise between a file's size and quality based on assumptions made about what we won't notice or don't need to see or hear in a given media file. So any video or audio or media that you watch today has more than likely been compressed with one codec or another, because in order to get sort of raw and compressed media onto a DVD or on a television stream or on the internet, you have to sort of shrink it down and compress it. And the only way to do that is to sort of compromise some of its quality or some of the imagery to sort of shrink down the size. So this is just sort of a standard thing. Different codecs are used to achieve that. So these assumptions, or compression algorithms, quote, deeply affect the life of images and media today. That's a quote by Adrian Mackenzie, who teaches at Lancaster University and has done some interesting writing on the subject of codecs. He explains that, quote, at a phenomenological level, they, or codecs, deeply influence the very texture, flow, and materiality of sounds and images. Codecs catalyze new relations between people, things, spaces, and times and events and forms. So the role codecs play in our ways of seeing the world is more pervasive than one would imagine. Like I said, nearly every bit of media content we encounter, television, DVDs, CDs, MP3s, anything we put on our iPod, videos on the internet, etc., have been compressed with codecs. Its importance is made clear from an economic standpoint. Mackenzie points out that the MPEG-2 codec, a widely used codec commercially and otherwise, is, quote, a mosaic of intellectual property claims, 640 patents held by entertainment, telecommunications, government, academic, and military owners. The large patent pool attests to the economic significance of the MPEG-2, the MPEG-2 codec. That number has increased. I think now it's closer to 700, so 700 different institutions have a stake in the MPEG-2 codec. So clearly, people want in on that. Being more interested, okay, right. Yeah, so being more interested in the process than the product here, I decided to collate my experiments and present them as a tutorial, so as a process, for others to sort of experiment, try out, and that's what became the glitch codec tutorial. So rather than a means of creating work, sort of began sharing that process. However, because of this complex mosaic of intellectual property claims, these patent pools, it's illegal for me to give this tutorial in most countries, including the US, and I think also here, which are the only countries I've given the tutorial or workshop at. So every time I've given the tutorial workshop, it's been illegal. And this is again for the patent reasons. So because in order to hack codecs, I need the source code to these codecs, and these are all owned by all these different institutions, and they're not so keen on people having at it without paying royalties. Additionally, I sort of have had to deal with these same patent issues in the actual distribution of the glitch codec. So while I've given this tutorial as a workshop, I also eventually sort of packaged it up for the internet. So I made a video that I put up online of the actual tutorial. I also put up this ISO file that you would download and burn onto a DVD, so you can sort of use the operating system that I use on your computer locally to sort of hack codecs. And I'm also a web developer, and I get very excited about sort of the latest in web development, and one of the sort of more recent tags that was introduced. Anybody here do web development? So if I say HTML and I say tags, some people have an idea. So there's a new tag called the video tag. This just means you can sort of natively embed videos onto your site without using any third-party application like Flash. And what this means for me is a more dynamic relationship between video and media content and every other aspect of the page, because you could do things like have a video playing, and at a certain point in the video, content around the page changes. So information might change depending on what part of the video you're on, and links can appear and disappear, and it's a more sort of interactive video experience. And I geek out about that kind of stuff. So I was really excited about putting my tutorial out there in this way. But it was very difficult because of the same patent issues the same patent laws that I was breaking in producing that tutorial. Has made it very tricky for browsers to implement this video tag, because it would mean choosing a sort of standard codec across all browsers. And while Internet Explorer and Safari are pushing for H.264, which is owned by Apple, so it's no kidding that Safari is pushing for that one, because they would make all the money on royalties, or a good chunk of it. Firefox and Chrome and Opera aren't so keen on that, specifically because Firefox wouldn't be able to afford those royalties. So that Firefox would just disappear if H.264 became the standard. So in order to use a video codec, you end up having to upload like 5 different versions of your video and sort of make this huge HTML mess, and it's extremely inefficient. So again, sort of railing up against these politics. And the point here, again, is that it's inevitable to avoid railing up against these politics the minute you start engaging in glitch art, whether it be at a sort of deeper level or even just data bending images. So that's kind of where my points start to wrap up or fade out into less coherent thoughts in my notes. So perhaps we can sort of organically move into a Q&A, perhaps even critique, no, you're wrong sort of scenario. Yes? this codec tutorial that I gave before, personally, I'm taking a very, very sort of extreme copyleft perspective, which I mentioned at the end of the tutorial. I mean, this is a gradient, right? So when I say copyleft, it's sort of opposite to copyright. There's also, I think, a copy middle. A lot less people use that term, copy middle, but it exists. For those of you familiar with the sort of intellectual property wars, groups like Creative Commons is a good example of a sort of copy middle, where they're not opposed to copyright. It's sort of alternative to copyright. It still works within copyright law, but allows for more liberal, for more freedoms, which is different from the copyleft, which oppose intellectual property altogether. And so I myself personally sort of fall between the copyleft and copy middle area. Like I'm constantly navigating back and forth. So I've got a Creative Commons sticker on my computer. I release a lot of stuff that way, but then this tutorial, I take a very extreme sort of leftist approach. And yeah, not only is all the videos and the ISO and everything sort of released open source and built with open source technology, but I also, at every workshop, produce those DVDs and always hand them out for free, and I never charge for those DVDs, so it's always at a cost to me, which is just to make a kind of point. So I just sort of really go to the extreme, just to sort of, yeah, it's more of a sort of instigation than a sort of maybe a solid set position. It's like I said, sort of navigate back and forth. So for digital artists at large, I think I have a lot of problems with Google, and I also have a lot of admiration for Google. And I think their model is one that makes more sense in a sort of digital age. This idea of handing stuff, or rather not forcing scarcity on digital files, which has been the norm since Bill Gates started selling stuff, right? This idea that scarcity is the only way to elicit value from any kind of product. So even though you can infinitely copy software at no cost, you force scarcity on it and sell it as if it were scarce. And Google's like, why would we do that? So they sort of put all of their digital tools, or most of them anyways, out there for free. And then in that action of giving the stuff out for free, they make a ton of money, right? So you use Gmail and they mine every word that you send out to anybody else and use that to sort of target ads. And same thing with Facebook, right? They sort of offer up this extremely useful tool and resource, Facebook, for free. And then again, with ads, you use all your information to sort of target ads. So that idea as a more abstract concept, I think, is one that is applicable to artists. And I think, yeah, some artists have done that. And maybe this tutorial could be could fit into that kind of model in the way that you're implying. Again, I wouldn't, since I'm trying to take a really sort of leftist approach. I would never, like I said, not only not charge for the workshop or performance, but also don't charge for the materials that I give out. But I could, and it would maybe be more efficient than charging for the download. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it is just the problematic nature of the internet and all of us giving away our work for free, Google making a ton of money by using the data, and we pay for hardware, we pay for the pipes that the information goes down, and certainly people like Google have a financial interest in supporting, I think, a copyleft view. It seems not problematic.
Right, yeah. I mean, the more you put out, the better for them, and they're definitely going to, like I said, support that. At the same time, there's that Tim O'Reilly quote that obscurity, not piracy, is the artist's worst nightmare, or whatever, something to that extent. Whereas as an artist, or I think it's safe to say that if you're an experimental new media artist, you're probably not super well known, unless you're Corey Archangel or Jody, and even then, not super well known. And so exposure helps you more than necessarily sort of locking your work down. So that idea that, like, for authors, and there's been different experiments, and different authors have done different experiments with free distribution of PDFs, and there have been cases where their revenue goes up on book sales, because they sort of, especially with art, or for authors and musicians especially, you build up a fan base. So sort of popular media that has this dynamic of a fan base, and fans will always want to support those kinds of artists. And so if you increase your fan base, you're going to sell more shirts and sell more concert tickets than if you have a limited fan base buying a handful of records. Or, I mean I'm trying not to open up certain doors that we could just sort of like rail in, and I'm really interested in these conversations. But I guess maybe if we could tie glitch into it a little bit for the sake of the context. But I gladly would talk for hours afterwards. Yeah.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
So Nick, I'm interested in seeing whether by democratizing the process of creating glitches in this way and elucidating upon them in the way that you're doing, it sort of detracts from some of the novelty of the glitch, and it's sort of mystique and the sense of power that sort of resides in it being kind of exclusive and being very obscure and ambiguous, and whether by just opening it out, fleshing it out like this, allowing anyone else to sort of create a glitch in this sort of fashion, it somehow detracts from it as well. Because I think the glitch is super niche. I mean, it's still, I think since the sort of glitch event in Chicago, it's just gone ballistic. But there is, I feel, I've been surveying this area for quite a long time with I feel there is something special about sort of not opening it up. Perhaps it's a completely different mindset, but I'm interested.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's a sort of like maybe an ideological stance that I take. Although I do agree that there is, I think there's room for both, and I think there's that both get amped when you open it up this way, or you get more of both when you open it up this way. And I was also really, my opinions on this have changed. So yeah, a few years ago when I sort of came to glitch from an experimental cinema perspective. So I was a big fan of somebody like Phil Solomon, who never revealed his secrets. I always wanted to know how he made the films that he made so that I could try to do the same thing, but I never quite figured it out. And that was both frustrating as a maker, but also there was something, like you said, something magical, romantic about not knowing.
So it's increased what I want to get straight is it's increased the attraction for you. The fact that you've discovered this sort of outlet of opening it up has actually made you more thirsty for it. Whereas I suppose it's a personal sort of perspective. The more you sort of dive deeper into it, maybe it loses some. For me personally, I think possibly knowing how something is done. I'm a huge fan of like the how stuff is made sort of programs. I watch them endlessly, but then once I know, it's like, oh, okay, that's how they do it. Or it's like a magic trick, you know?
Right.
You know how it's done, and the next time it's performed, does it really, does it have grip you in the same kind of way? Or?
Yeah. Well, I guess the issue is that there's different things that excite me about the glitch, or about glitch art, maybe better, and there's more on the side of inclusiveness than exclusiveness. And the two main ones might be glitch art, like I said before, as a community. So an event like glitch, like the last 3 weeks, there've been a lot of work, and I haven't slept. Have been just so much fun. Meeting all the people that work on this stuff and talking about these things is huge, and it only happens when you open it up, right? And the second is, again, to touch on these politics that I'm mentioning, which is something that personally I'm very interested in, become more apparent, more real in the process. So I can make a video about politics, and that might hit some people, but I feel like it's easier for me to engage more people with these issues when I share the process, when they're breaking their images themselves, and when they're watching, me watching an echo of a broken image that I made. That said, technology is always upgrading, and people are constantly putting out new things, which means new breaks. And so there's always an area, I think, of glitch art which is shrouded in mystery. It's sort of like the newest glitch, or the newest, hacked such and such. I think like John Satram's work is a great example of something that has a large percentage of it really shrouded in sort of mystery, where you're constantly wondering what is happening. And as he jumps from the computer to the iPad, for example, that stays alive with new technology. I'm getting signaled that time is up. So yeah, thanks everybody.